The massive chamber stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls gleaming with holographic displays showing thousands of alien species watching from across the galaxy. Captain Lee Min-ho straightened his pristine blue uniform as he stepped into the center of the courtroom, the weight of representing all humanity pressing down on his shoulders. The Galactic Council sat in a circular arrangement above him, each species more bizarre than the last. The Vex delegation dominated one section. Insectoid creatures with razor-sharp limbs and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Their leader, Kathak, stood nearly 9 feet tall, his exoskeleton covered in what looked like battle scars that pulsed with a faint green glow. The humans violated our sacred hunting grounds in the Vega system, Kathak's translator screeched, in mechanical tones that made several smaller species wince. They dare to trespass where warriors have claimed territory for 1,000 cycles. Commander Kim Soo-jin watched from the observation deck, her hands clenched behind her back. She had served with Lee for 5 years, and she knew that look in his eyes. Calm on the surface, but calculating every angle of attack. The human delegation was outnumbered 50-1, and most of the alien species had never seen humans in person before today. Captain Park Jun-seok, the team's negotiator, stood beside Lee with a datapad containing all their evidence. The documentation was crystal clear. Humanity had claimed salvage rights to derelict ships in open space, nowhere near any established Vex territory. But facts seemed less important than politics in this place. The three-eyed Keth representative hissed from their platform, orange slime dripping from their speaking tentacles. They had their own grudge against humans after a misunderstanding at a trading post near the Andromeda Gateway. The crystalline lore beings remained silent, their faceted bodies refracting the chamber's light into prismatic rainbows, but their posture indicated disapproval. These mammals are soft creatures, Kathak continued, his mandibles clicking with disdain. They have no honor, no strength. They scurry through space in their metal shells like insects avoiding the light. A murmur ran through the gallery. Several species had heard rumors about humans, strange beings who seemed capable of both extreme violence and surprising compassion. But seeing them here, standing calmly in their simple uniforms, many wondered if the stories had been exaggerated. Lee stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber without technological amplification. The evidence speaks for itself, Honorable Council. We found those ships floating dead in space, their crews long gone. No distress signals, no territorial markers. By galactic law, salvage belongs to whoever can secure it. Kathak's exoskeleton flared bioluminescent patches lighting up in aggressive patterns. You quote law to warriors? We do not hide behind words like frightened younglings. If you have strength, prove it. The chamber fell silent. Even the smallest species stopped their nervous chittering. By invoking the ancient right of combat trial, Kathak had escalated this far beyond a simple territorial dispute. No species had challenged this law in centuries. It was considered barbaric by most civilized worlds. Major Yoon Dae-hyun, monitoring from the human command post, felt his stomach tighten. The combat trial meant Lee would have to face whatever weapon the Vex considered their strongest. The Vex had conquered 47 worlds in the last century alone. Their military might was legendary throughout this arm of the galaxy. Lee never hesitated. I accept the challenge. The words echoed through the chamber, and the various species erupted in different forms of surprise, screeches, hisses, harmonic tones, and patterns of colored light. Lieutenant Cho Yoon-ji, the youngest member of the human delegation, gripped her chair arm so hard her knuckles turned white. Excellent, Kathak rumbled, mandibles spreading in what might have been a smile. The trial will be tomorrow. You may choose a champion to fight in your place, as is your right. I'll fight myself, Lee replied without missing a beat. Wouldn't want to deny you the pleasure of facing a human directly. More chittering filled the chamber. The Vex hadn't expected such confidence from a species they considered weak. Even the council members leaned forward in their various seats, pods, and hovering apparatus. Dr. Han Yong-tai, reviewing bioscans from the science station, noticed something interesting about the human readings. Their stress hormones were elevated, but not nearly as much as expected. The humans seemed almost excited rather than terrified. As the session adjourned, Kathak approached Lee directly, ignoring diplomatic protocol. His compound eyes studied the human captain from multiple angles. "You should choose your fiercest warrior to represent you, little mammal. My devastator cannon has never left anything alive." Lee smiled, a genuine expression that somehow made several nearby aliens step back. "Looking forward to it," he said simply. Commander Kim met Lee as they left the chamber. "The Devastator is no joke," she whispered. "Intelligence reports say it can melt through a meter of ship armor." "I know," Lee replied, still smiling. "This should be interesting." The arena stretched before them like a massive bowl carved from obsidian stone, its dark surface reflecting the lights of 1,000 recording devices floating overhead. Captain Lee stepped onto the smooth floor, his boots clicking against the polished material. The sound echoed in the vast space, making him seem impossibly small in the center of the arena. The stands rose in tiers all around, packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Some had traveled for months just to witness this moment. The air buzzed with translation devices working overtime, as beings from different worlds murmured to each other in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal, or electronic static. Kathak emerged from the opposite entrance, no longer in his diplomatic robes. Now he wore full battle armor, a masterpiece of Vex engineering that made him look even more terrifying. The armor was deep black with green energy veins running through it like a circulatory system. His compound eyes glowed brighter through the helmet's visor as servos whined and hydraulics hissed with each movement. Behind him, two smaller Vex carried something covered by a cloth that seemed to absorb light. Even through the covering, you could feel the weight of whatever lay beneath. The Vex had built their entire civilization around warfare, and their weapons were legendary throughout this part of the galaxy. Major Yoon watched from the human command center, his fingers dancing across holographic displays showing feeds from every angle. "Energy readings are off the charts," he reported to Commander Kim, who stood rigid beside him. "Whatever that thing is, it's putting out more power than our main fusion reactor." Lieutenant Cho monitored the communication links, ensuring Earth Command received every detail of what was happening. Back on Earth, billions of humans were watching this moment, their first real introduction to galactic politics. Most didn't even know Earth had joined the Galactic Council until 3 months ago. "Ladies and gentlemen, and all other forms of sentient life," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. "Today we witness the ancient trial by combat, as decreed by the laws of our ancestors. The challenger may use their strongest weapon. The defendant must survive or be judged guilty." Kathak gestured to his assistants, who pulled away the cloth with ceremonial precision. The weapon revealed beneath made several species in the audience gasp or make their equivalent sounds of shock. The Devastator stood 5 feet tall, shaped like a massive rifle but with components that seemed to bend space around them. Energy cores ran along its length, each one pulsing with contained power. "The Devastator Mark 7, Kathak announced, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's speakers. "This weapon has cracked moons and carved new valleys on worlds that dared challenge the Vex. No armor has withstood its fury. No shield has deflected its power." Dr. Han, monitoring from the science station, felt his instruments go haywire just from proximity to the weapon. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases," he called out. "It's operating on principles we don't fully understand." The weapon began to charge, and the very air around it started to shimmer with heat. Strange patterns of light danced across its surface as internal mechanisms came online. A low hum filled the arena, growing steadily louder until it seemed to vibrate through everyone's bones. Some of the smaller species in the audience actually fled, their survival instincts overriding their curiosity. The Keth delegation hissed nervously, while the crystalline lore beings darkened their facets to protect themselves from the building energy. Colonel Bay, stationed with the emergency response team, felt beads of sweat form on his forehead. They had protocols for extraction if things went wrong. But looking at that weapon, he wondered if their plans would be fast enough. The charging process took exactly 3 minutes, a deliberate choice by Kathak to build tension. The arena lights dimmed as the weapon drew power from the station's grid. Warning signs flashed around the perimeter as automated safety systems detected dangerous energy levels. "Witness the power of the Vex," Kathak roared, lifting the massive weapon with surprising ease thanks to his powered armor. "This human thinks he can laugh at our might? Let him laugh at this." The weapon locked onto Lee's position with tracking systems that painted him with invisible targeting lasers. Every camera in the arena focused on his face, broadcasting his expression to billions of watching beings across the galaxy. But Lee didn't look afraid. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped casually behind his back, watching the weapon charge with what could only be described as professional interest. Some observers later said they saw him actually lean forward slightly, as if curious about the technical details. "Captain," Commander Kim's voice came through his earpiece. "Whatever happens, Earth is proud of you." Lee smiled. "Tell Earth to keep watching," he replied softly. "This is going to be interesting." The Devastator reached full charge. The air around it crackled with energy discharges, and the weapon itself seemed to glow with inner fire. Kathak's targeting systems locked on. The arena fell completely silent except for the weapon's ominous humming. "Prepare to die, human," Kathak growled, his finger moving to the trigger. The arena held its breath. Not a single being in the vast chamber made a sound as Kathak's armored finger squeezed the trigger. Even the floating camera drones seemed to hover more quietly, as if they too understood the gravity of this moment. The Devastator erupted. A beam of pure energy tore through the air, not the clean laser most species used, but something primal and raw. The blast was so bright that the arena's automatic filters kicked in, darkening every viewing screen to protect sensitive eyes. The sound was indescribable, like thunder and screaming wind mixed with the roar of a dying star. The energy struck Captain Lee dead center, engulfing him in a column of superheated plasma that stretched from floor to ceiling. The impact created a shockwave that rippled outward, cracking the arena floor in spiderweb patterns. Several aliens in the lower rows were knocked from their seats by the force alone. Commander Kim gripped the railing of the observation deck so hard her knuckles went white. The human delegation stood frozen, watching their captain disappear into the heart of that destroying light. Major Yoon's instruments screamed warnings as they tried to measure the energy levels, readings that defied their understanding of physics. 4. 5 full seconds, the beam continued. 5 seconds that felt like hours to everyone watching. The air itself burned, leaving trails of ionized gas that danced like ghosts in the arena. The weapon systems finally shut down, leaving only the echo of that terrible sound bouncing off the walls. Smoke rose from the impact point, thick, acrid smoke that made the air shimmer with heat. The floor where Lee had stood was a perfect circle of melted stone, still glowing orange hot. The very air sparkled with residual energy, creating aurora-like patterns that slowly faded. Kathak stood with the smoking weapon in his hands, his compound eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Several Vex in the audience made clicking sounds that passed for applause among their species. The other aliens muttered in their various languages, some expressing shock at the weapon's power, others offering condolences to the human delegation. Dr. Han stared at his readings in disbelief. "The temperature at impact exceeded 50,000 degrees, he whispered. "That's hotter than the surface of our sun." Lieutenant Cho had tears in her eyes as she prepared to send the death notification to Earth Command. 40 billion humans had just watched their representative die in the most spectacular way possible. How do you tell an entire planet that their first galactic champion lasted exactly 5 seconds? The smoke began to clear, carried away by the arena's air circulation system. The molten stone continued to glow, casting eerie shadows that danced across the watching faces. Kathak raised the Devastator above his head in a gesture of victory. "So ends the foolish pride of humanity," he roared, his voice echoing through the speakers. "Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge the Vex. We are the strong, you are the weak." But then something impossible happened. Through the thinning smoke, a figure emerged. Not a charred corpse or scattered remains, but Captain Lee himself walking calmly out of the superheated chaos. His uniform was now a bit wrinkled and there were small scorch marks on his sleeves, but he was completely, impossibly unharmed. The arena fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The absolute stillness that comes when the mind struggles to process something that shouldn't be possible. Lee looked down at his slightly singed sleeve, picked off a small piece of burned fabric and flicked it away. Then he looked up at Kathak, who stood frozen with the Devastator still raised above his head, and Captain Lee began to laugh. It started as a chuckle, a quiet sound that somehow carried perfectly in the silence. Then it grew, building into genuine, delighted laughter that filled the arena. Not the mad cackle of someone broken by impossible stress, but the warm, amused laugh of someone who had just experienced something genuinely funny. The sound was infectious in a way that transcended species barriers. Even beings who had never heard human laughter before understood the emotion behind it. This wasn't fear or pain. This was pure, joyful amusement. Kathak's weapon clattered to the ground, the Vex warrior's mandibles hanging open in shock. His compound eyes tried to focus on Lee from dozens of angles simultaneously, as if seeing from multiple perspectives might make this make sense. "That's your strongest weapon?" Lee asked between chuckles, gesturing at the Devastator with casual disinterest. "I've felt stronger breezes from my air conditioner." Commander Kim felt her legs go weak with relief, but her mind raced with questions. How was this possible? What had just happened? The readings showed the weapon had worked perfectly. The energy had hit with full force. Major Yoon's instruments had recorded everything, but the data made no sense. Lee's biosigns had never even peaked. His heart rate had actually decreased during the weapon's discharge, as if he'd been relaxing. The arena erupted, not with cheers or boos, but with a cacophony of confusion. Every species present began talking, at once in their own languages, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The translator systems overloaded from the volume of simultaneous conversation. Lee's laughter continued, a sound that would echo through galactic history, marking the moment when humanity announced to the universe that their understanding of everything had just changed forever. Captain Lee's laughter finally subsided, but the smile never left his face as he looked around the stunned arena. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional bewildered chirp or hiss from various alien species. Kathak stood motionless, his weapon system forgotten on the floor beside him. "I suppose you all deserve an explanation," Lee said, his voice carrying easily through the arena's acoustic systems. He straightened his slightly wrinkled uniform and walked closer to the center of the circle, "though I'm not sure you're going to like what you hear." Commander Kim felt herself breathe for what seemed like the first time in minutes. From her position in the observation deck, she could see other human delegates beginning to smile. They knew what was coming. The secret humanity had kept for the past decade was about to be revealed. 15 years ago, Lee began, pacing slowly around the melted crater in the floor. Our scientists discovered something interesting on a dead world we now call Haven 7, ruins of an ancient civilization. The progenitors, we called them, though we never learned their real name. The crystalline lore beings suddenly brightened, their faceted surfaces reflecting more light. They had heard whispers of the progenitors, in their own ancient texts. The three-eyed Keth delegation hissed softly, recognizing the name from their oldest stories. "Among the ruins we found technology," Lee continued. "Not weapons or ships, but something far more practical. Personal shielding systems that operated on principles we didn't understand. Still don't fully understand, if I'm being honest." Major, Yoon watched the telemetry coming from Earth Command. The revelation had already begun cascading through human colonies. Secure channels buzzed with confirming data as facilities that had been classified for years suddenly acknowledged their existence. "We spent 5 years just figuring out how to turn the things on," Lee said with a rueful chuckle. "Another 5 learning to manufacture them. The last 5, well, we've been testing them." Kathak found his voice, his translator crackling with static. "Impossible. Our weapons have destroyed entire fleets. The Devastator can crack planetary crust. Oh, I'm sure it can, Lee agreed pleasantly. Devastating weapon, really impressive. But you see, we've been using these shields in environments you can't imagine. Dr. Han accessed files from his workstation, broadcasting holographic displays around the arena. Images flickered to life showing human research stations in impossible locations. Teams working inside solar coronas, their figures barely visible, through the superheated plasma. Scientists walking on the surfaces of neutron stars taking readings while bathed in radiation that should have killed them instantly. We have research outposts around black holes, Lee explained, pointing to one image showing humans in regular spacesuits working just outside an event horizon. We've sent teams into the hearts of supernovas to collect data. Last month, Captain Park here took a vacation diving in a pulsar storm. Captain Park Jun-seok waved from his position with the human delegation, grinning sheepishly. Beach planets are overrated, he called out. The arena began to buzz with activity as the implications hit different species at different rates. The highly technological races understood first. If humans could survive in stellar cores, then conventional weapons were useless against them. The warrior species took longer, still trying to process that raw strength might not be the ultimate power after all. The funny thing about progenitor shields, Lee continued, is that they don't just protect against energy. They seem to adapt to whatever tries to hurt you. The more extreme the environment, the stronger they become. Your Devastator there? He gestured at the weapon. That registered as maybe a warm summer day compared to the stuff we work with daily. Lieutenant Cho pulled up more files, showing training facilities inside stars where humans practiced combat maneuvers. Swimming pools filled with liquid plasma became visible on screens throughout the arena, obstacle courses that wound through solar flares like playgrounds. We didn't mean to keep it secret, Lee said, though his tone suggested otherwise. We just wanted to understand the galaxy better before revealing what we could do. Imagine our surprise when we discovered that what you all consider ultimate weapons are things we use for recreational activities. The Vex war leader stumbled backward, his exoskeleton clattering against the arena wall. Everything his species believed about warfare, about strength, about dominance in the galaxy, had just been casually demolished by a smiling human who treated their most powerful weapon like a gentle breeze. But how many of you have these shields? Asked the lead counselor of the Keth, her three eyes blinking in patterns that indicated deep thought. Lee's smile widened. Well, that's the really interesting part. Once we figured out how to mass-produce them, we made sure every human had one. Every single one. From our farmers on agricultural worlds to our deep space explorers. We figured if we were going to explore dangerous places, everyone should be protected. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled species. Not just a few elite soldiers or scientists, but their entire species was protected by technology that made conventional warfare obsolete. Dr. Han displayed the final set of images. Human families having picnics on the surface of Venus, children playing in radioactive storms for fun, colonists building cities inside active volcanoes. So thank you for the demonstration, Lee said to Kathak, who still stood in shock. But next time, you might want to bring something a bit stronger. The arena remained silent for exactly 17 seconds after Lee's revelation. Then pandemonium erupted. Every species began talking at once, their delegates shouting questions, making offers, demanding explanations. The Vex delegation huddled together, their compound eyes flashing in rapid patterns as they recalculated everything they knew about galactic politics. The crystalline lore beings chimed in harmonics that spoke of ancient prophecies mentioning the children of the progenitors. Kathak slowly removed his helmet, revealing a face that held a mixture of awe and shame. His mandibles clicked nervously as he approached Lee, each step seeming to cost him great effort. For a warrior race that valued strength above all else, being completely outclassed was worse than death. Human, he said, his voice carrying without the mechanical translation. We were wrong. The Vex have never retreated from battle, but we have also never faced opponents who use stars as playgrounds. Lee extended his hand, a gesture that meant nothing to most alien species, but had become somewhat known through human diplomatic efforts. Kathak stared at it for a moment, then slowly reached out with one of his razor-sharp appendages, carefully touching Lee's palm. "The Vex offer alliance," Kathak continued, his words carrying through the arena. "If you can laugh at our strongest weapons, we want you as friends, not enemies." Commander Kim descended to the arena floor, her face beaming with relief and pride. Major Yoon and Dr. Han followed, their instruments still recording every moment of this historic encounter. The other human delegates formed a protective but welcoming circle around Lee. "Alliance accepted," Lee replied, his voice carrying the weight of official policy. "Though I should warn you, humans have a strange habit of making friends with everyone they meet. It might take some getting used to." The lead counselor of the Keth delegation slithered forward, her 3 eyes focusing on Lee with intensity. "The ancient texts speak of those who walked in fire and swam in starlight. We thought them myths. Our seers must speak with your scientists." Lieutenant Cho stepped forward, already pulling up contact information on her datapad. Human xenoanthropologists had been eager to study Keth religious texts ever since contact was established. This could be the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. The arena's official announcement system crackled to life. The trial was over, but nobody wanted to leave. History was being made with every conversation, every offer of alliance, every exchange of contact information. Colony Governor Ryu Min-chang arrived with the secondary diplomatic team, having rushed from the human embassy when word of Lee's survival reached them. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of excitement as he began, fielding offers from dozens of species simultaneously. "The Zephyrians want to discuss mining rights in systems we consider too dangerous," he whispered to Kim. "Apparently they have a list of 47 stars they'd like us to extract resources from." Captain Park found himself surrounded by military representatives from half a dozen species, all wanting to know if humans would be interested in joint defense treaties. The idea of having allies who could literally walk through anything was incredibly appealing to civilizations that had spent centuries cowering from stronger neighbors. Dr. Han was in his element, discussing shield technology with scientists from multiple species. He carefully explained what humans understood about progenitor tech, while being clear about its limitations. The shields required constant maintenance, could only be manufactured with specific rare materials, and had energy requirements that strained even advanced human power systems. "The funny thing is," he told a group of lore researchers, "we still don't really understand how they work. We can build them, activate them, adjust their settings, but the underlying principles remain a mystery. It's like someone gave us a hover car when we just invented the wheel." The political ramifications were already rippling outward. The 3 major galactic powers, the Vex hegemony, the Keth Union, and the Crystalline Collective, were all scrambling to offer partnerships. Smaller species that had been oppressed for centuries saw an opportunity for protection. Pirate organizations were already reconsidering their life choices. Within hours, the entire structure of galactic politics had shifted. Species that had been content to avoid human space now actively sought them out. Trade agreements that had been stalled for months were suddenly approved. Research partnerships that had been considered impossible were greenlit in emergency sessions. Lee found a quiet corner of the arena where he could speak privately with his team. The initial triumph was already being tempered by the reality of what came next. "Command wants us to proceed carefully," Commander Kim reported, reading messages from Earth. "The President is concerned about what happens when everyone realizes we have effectively unlimited access to every extreme environment in the galaxy. Resource extraction rights alone are worth more than the GDP of most planets," Major Yoon added. "And that's not even considering the strategic advantages." Lee nodded, watching the various species delegates still networking frantically around the arena. "We always knew this day would come. The question was whether we'd be ready for it." Dr. Han approached with a tablet full of requests. 17. Species want immediate technological exchanges. 23 want defense partnerships. The Vex are offering to make us honorary warriors, and the Aquatic Confederation wants to know if we can help them colonize the bottom of gas giant atmospheres. Lieutenant Cho looked up from her communications array. Sir, Earth is reporting similar reactions from every human colony. We're getting alliance requests faster than we can process them. Captain Park gestured to the ongoing chaos. At least we don't have to worry about being ignored anymore. Lee smiled, the same expression that had echoed through the arena after surviving the Devastator. No, we definitely don't have that problem anymore. As the news spread beyond the stadium, across interstellar networks, and through diplomatic channels, one thing became clear. Humanity's age of quiet observation was over. The galaxy had just learned that the soft-looking mammals from Sol were possibly the most dangerous species anyone had ever encountered. And the best part was, they seemed happy to share that power with anyone willing to be their friend.